It's not a bird, it's not a plane, it's Superhero Slate. It's a modern podcast where we talk about everything that's great, like movies, TV, superheroes. It's Superhero Slate. Oh yeah.
Hello everyone and welcome to Superhero Slate, the show where we run down the latest superhero entertainment news.
We love TV, movies, and superheroes, so let's talk it all out.
My name is Chris Dillard.
And my name's Mike Royer.
And welcome to the official Superhero Slate review of DC's Blue Beetle.
Blue Beetle, it's out. It's not streaming.
It was not. We had to pay to watch this movie.
Which is what we all expected. And then Chris, was that timing meant? Was that intentional? The pop-up that I just saw on my screen, a Plex notification from you.
Oh yeah,
a certain movie just added to your archive.
It wasn't timed, but I'm glad you get those notifications because those are very important.
Usually I just ignore those because they routinely pop up while we're recording the show.
Yeah.
But that one seemed a little extra poignant.
Timely. Yeah. Blue Beetle. We're here to talk about Blue Beetle, folks.
Yes. And of course I'll use this as an opportunity to also plug our weekly news episodes, yes, which we're going to be recording after that, and you're going to have to tune in to that episode. Yes. So you're going to have to do some math here. It's going to be episode 439 for the news. And you strictly want to tune in because once we're done recording this, the impending hurricane, yes, on the West Coast will be even closer to my extremely sophisticated recording studio. Mm-hmm. So
this is not a metaphor, people. This is actually a real thing happening
yes,
while we're recording these shows.
Yes, I mean, I might say, I'd hate to date the podcast, but we're reviewing Blue Beetle. We know exactly when we're recording this podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's kind of a slightly historic hurricane bearing down on Southern California right now. It's like on its way, which is the weirdest thing. I've never experienced a hurricane before, so it's weird to know like it's coming, but I don't have to worry about right this second. Mm-hmm. So we're gonna review Blue Beetle like normal people, and then I think the news episode we're gonna go crazy.
Yeah, not to bury the lead here. Normal people aren't watching Blue Beetle, so this is a very, very niche podcast today, Mike, that we'll be reviewing because we'll talk about it in a little bit. But the box office numbers are not strong. They're not strong for this movie right now. So, but yes, Blue Beetle, this was the movie. We've talked about this before. Was originally filmed for HBO Max along with Batgirl. They were both announced. Mm-hmm. Batgirl canned due to, insurance claims or something like that? Tax purposes?
A ledger somewhere in an accountant's office.
Yes, some sort of... fancy accounting, if you will. But Blue Beetle was transitioned from streaming to theatrical release, and it's out in theaters. And I'll be honest. I'll just go ahead and say the movie didn't look like a streaming movie for a lot of it. And I'm going to talk about some of the best. I'm actually impressed how little I was like, man, I should watch this at home. To be completely honest, I was like, there's some pretty good things in here. Not the best overall by any means, but I was like, okay, that's great. But as I mentioned, let's just go ahead. We don't. There's not a lot to break that. If you've watched Blue Beetle, you're here to listen about Blue Beetle. If you haven't watched it, you still want to hear us talk about it. Let's jump into the box office, Mike. Right now, currently, this is sitting at around 25 million domestically for that, which is honestly not a lot, Mike. This is what I've been told is the second lowest DC movie. The first one was Wonder Woman 84, and that was during the pandemic and came out streaming at the same time. Now, I will say, with 43.4 million worldwide, honestly, I didn't expect this movie to be a quote-unquote blockbuster or tentpole movie from DC. Did you expect hundreds of millions of dollars opening weekend from this?
No, not at all.
Yeah, I'm like, this is fair. Like, this was not shot on the budget of the Flash, as an example. We'll talk about Flash in the news, our news episode this week, how little it made compared to what's cost. This didn't cost as much as the Flash or Superman or Wonder Woman or any of those movies to be made. It was literally shot with streaming in mind. So that, I think, this is maybe not making money, but overall, not the worst in the world. Right.
Yeah. For a little bit of context, I went over to one of our newer favorite websites, Chris, The Numbers.
That's what I pulled these from.
Used their movie comparison tool, and I think of maybe a fair comparison at the moment, depending on how you want to break it down, might be Shazam! Fury of the Gods, just simply because it's a movie that also came out this year as well. And I think maybe had similar amounts of anticipation in a way of like kind of medium, mid, as maybe the kids might say. And Blue Beetle's just tracking just slightly behind Shazam! Fury of the Gods. So I think we both know for a fact that the budget on Fury of the Gods was much higher for sure. Yeah. You don't even have to look it up because you know it's a sequel, so it definitely got more money for the budget and also just for the actors in general.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right, Chris. This didn't necessarily need to dazzle us at the box office, but hopefully it dazzled people critically, because I think that's what every that's what every studio at least is hoping for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and but just for I guess people who want to use Rotten Tomatoes, I think it's like a 72% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 92% audience score. So that's fairly good, right? Like in this climate, that's fairly good.
Yeah, and I think weirdly enough, you might wonder why we're getting so technical maybe at the very beginning of a review for a movie like Blue Beetle. I think it's just because this is just how everything is with the current DC slate right now. On our normal weekly news episodes, we reported in the past that James Gunn has said everything before his Superman movie is not considered canon for his DC universe. But of course, we know all of that is subject to change based on popularity, reception from the audience, money. I mean, we know for a fact if Blue Beetle would have made Fast and Furious money at the box office, something crazy like that, it definitely would be folded into the DCU. So that's kind of why we're looking at it from more of this analytical side of things. So as what I'm seeing right now, at least critically and box office wise, I wouldn't say that's necessarily a win to get the character in the movie ushered into the universe, but there might be possibly other strategic avenues that maybe the studio might want to take. But as of right now, I don't think this is a home run for maybe sticking around long term in the broader universe.
I would say sure, maybe in terms of if you're looking at like we need to have peak operating efficiency for all this, right? Like it needs to be number one all over the place, and it is number one actually in the theaters right now. So it's actually beating Barbie in its 5th week, which is still surprising, right? That movie's it's got legs. I'm trying not to be misogynistic about that, Mike, but Barbie has legs, if you will. Blue Beetle, we don't know what that looks like, but I'm going to push back and say, hey, really the biggest name in this, there's 2 big names. One is Susan Sarandon, right, as a character, and the other was George Lopez, right? Mm-hmm. So like literally, if you want a cheap actor and a character that did better than medium at the box office, you probably we can pull this forward. It's affordable. It wasn't hated. It wasn't loathed. We can probably use something from this. Which is something you can't really, like the other ones, like you got Zachary Levi out here running his own name into the ground during strikes. The Rock tried to ruin DC Universe himself with his Black Adam movie. So we can take a mid ground. We could take a mid and probably be okay with this for once. But as you mentioned, James Gunn, his DCU technically doesn't start for 2 more years, right, with Superman Legacy. And that's, if things, the strikes come together and things can get going and moving. So, we may be 2.5, 3, maybe 4 years out before we hear of anything. But we'll talk about in this movie is, and I think if you haven't seen any other DC movie, this movie's enough removed. It doesn't matter, right? Like there is literally, I don't feel anything in here that ties it to any DC EU or DCU at large, right? Like it's very isolated with a few name drops here and there at the end of the day. But let's go ahead. Let's jump into the review. Let's just get into this because you've got a hurricane coming, and we're going to go ahead and just kind of talk about this. And we've not talked. You saw this yesterday morning, right? Saturday morning. Mm-hmm. I saw it Saturday evening. And I don't want to talk about my movie going experience, but I hate going Saturday evenings. We had kids who were being really, really obnoxious in this theater, like 10 to 15-year-old kids. I'm like. Get the hell out of here. But anyway, you want to go first? You want me to go first? Which one you want to go?
Go ahead.
Okay, well,
go
for
ahead.
this, I'm okay with this movie, Mike. I'm down. I'm like down the middle, like straight down the middle. It's not. It's more a little more of an I don't care. Like comparing my last review of Secret Invasion, where I'm just like I don't care. This is like there are some really cool parts in here. I'm not. I didn't watch Cobra Kai, so I'm not familiar with the actor. Right. But I really enjoyed his family aspect. It was very, very big focus on family. If you want to draw that Fast 10, comparison to this movie, there are some really cool parts in this movie, including, the suit. It was really fun. You also get to see, this is from the trailers, but there is a bug ship and there's some really fun stuff with it later on. But, overall, just kind of a, boy, haven't I seen this in another superhero movie before that's done probably similar or better. Similar beforehand just means this is the second, person to the table, so it's not getting that impact. But overall, I didn't hate it. I think the actors had some pretty, the main actor was really good. The family actors were good. There's more George Lopez than I anticipated in this film, so that was fun. But overall, just right down the middle, like sure, fine. This was I would have watched this on streaming and been totally happy. Saw it in theaters. That's cool. Don't need to revisit it probably ever again. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, I would say similarly along the same way, right? This movie is a mixture of just like when you say it's average or down the middle, you might be expecting you go into this movie and just everything is mediocre in a way. And I would say more it's a mixture of highs and lows. You'll find parts you really like, and then you'll also be kind of forced to watch really cringy scenes unfold or really cheesy moments that feel like they're out of place, at least in their own movie. A lot of quiet moments that really like took away from the the momentum that was going on, and then there's quiet moment by quiet moment, and you're like, I get what you're saying. Yeah, but overall, the most effective parts, I think, like you were saying, was the family dynamic, which they really leaned into, which I really appreciated. I also really liked the new, fresh perspective that came from this hero and family from a culture that's usually not given the spotlight in a superhero movie. They make I like that the I don't know if it was the director, the screenwriter, maybe even the producers, but I like how they took the chance to make references to very, I don't want to say niche cultural things, but niche to the standard movie-going audiences, where I don't need to understand the reference, but I have the context enough to get the joke, but everyone else in my theater who understands it is having like a great time. And I was like, oh, this is good. This is great because, you're not just getting like the repetitive references and jokes that you might usually get nowadays. Like, oh, you're bringing in a different cultural eye, which I really liked. So that really helped elevate parts of the film. But yeah, it's like a mixture. It's weird. It's like it's not average because it's mediocre. It's average because if you add the highs in with the lows, you're kind of coming in at kind of like like a 6.5, 7 out of 10 or something like that. Like narratively, I wouldn't say there's anything that's particularly standing out, like you mentioned.
Nothing is new about this movie.
Yeah, this isn't wholly different, and this is something that we brought up leading up to the movie for a couple of weeks, where like you can just see kind of like the origin story like painted on the wall just from the trailers, right? So luckily they were able to pull off some effective things, which I would watch a sequel of this movie, and I would think that they could have a lot of extra and new runway to play with if they had a sequel, because you have your character established, you kind of went through the typical, somewhat predictable origin story of the character, and now you can just have fun with it, and you get to really build out your universe a little bit more. This isn't a spoiler at all, but there are 2 after credit scenes, and usually if a movie is putting in after credit scenes, there at least hope that they can develop the story a little bit more. But we'll talk about that more here in spoilers, because I don't want to spoil anything if somebody still is going to run out and check this movie out. I don't know how long you're going to have to wait for it to hit Max, where it was originally intended to air, but I think there's just enough here, I think, where I could recommend somebody going to the theaters to check it out. But it's just enough.
Like I would say like a matinee. Like I'm like don't don't go during the expensive time of the theater. Go to a matinee. You're gonna enjoy yourself. Go to the bar at the movie theater. Grab a drink. Have a good time at this. But yeah, I agree. I think honestly, it's kind of hard to talk about this without spoilers. Like, I know it's not spoilers because it's very predictable. I think we should just go ahead and get into it. But like, I think before we get to it, like, yeah, it's a recommend from us. But like, boy, you don't need to go see it this weekend if you don't want to, right? I think yeah, you should watch it, but it's not like, hey, you're missing out by anything by getting here. So I'm going to mark spoilers in the notes here below, so you can jump ahead, leave, watch it, come back and listen to more, or just continue ahead if you're some sort of psycho who wants to get movies spoiled for them before they go and watch it. But yeah, so number one, they had me in the first minute, Mike, because it showed a bunch of beetles of different colors in space, kind of like the Green Lantern Corps, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what if the villain was, I'm like, oh my god, there's other beetles I didn't even know about that have different abilities out there. And I'm like, that would be a really cool thing. Like, my mind ran wild that first minute of the movie, Mike. I don't know if you had that same, like, kind of thing. I'm like, I didn't expect this. I just expected us to find it on Earth and start there, rather than this whole, like, hey, it's from space and there's other colored beetles kind of deal.
Yeah. I mean, I would say there's definitely potential moving forward, but I think that was kind of a weaker part of the movie, just for me, is just the origin of kind of everything that we're looking at.
Well, I think time out. I think there is no origin of everything. That's what I want to know. Like, what planet, what species, who created these? Like, where did it come from? I want to know. Yeah, and I think it would exist well in a Green Lantern show, as what I'm saying, like, or the Green Lantern movie, like. If they want to tie the Beatles into the Green Lantern, like, Space Corps, that's what I'd be like, okay, I could see a tie in here. But that's more what I meant. Like, oh, I don't think it added to the movie. I was about to say, like, that was like a real high for me, and then we never touched it again, is what I was going to say.
Yeah, I almost thought, like, the very last after credit scene was cute, that little stop motion animation, right? Yeah. But I was almost expecting, like, a little, close up on maybe another beetle, maybe an alien planet, an alien spaceship or something, just something to flesh out the concept that these were from another world a little bit. And it got me, like, wondering a little bit more if maybe the DC universe could possibly lean into more extraterrestrial alien life a little bit more in their new universe, right? Because it seems to be that's where they're getting all their juice from, right? I mean, the main hero that all of this universe revolves around, Superman, is an alien. Yeah. So,
and the Green Lantern has been confirmed, which are alien powered by the
exactly.
rings.
And the Snyder fans out there, their favorite character of all time, Darkseid, from another part of the universe as well.
The rumored Lobo that will probably not happen.
Yeah, so there's just a lot to mine out there, in space, and I could have got a little bit of that more in the movie. I think I would have appreciated that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why I'm like, my creative juices were flowing. I'm like, this is awesome. This is great. I love this idea. And then we never touched on it again. It was like, it's been on Earth for years, and the beetle has to choose you.
Yeah, I feel like I was kind of like also hoping for, like, beetle related too, like. I don't necessarily need, like, the most creative villain of all time necessarily in a kickoff Blue Beetle movie, but, like, it was a very predictable, plot line for a villain. I want to make weapons out of this alien technology. Seems to be a tale as old as time. I was kind of hoping they could put more of a unique twist on it in some way. I don't know, just sit down, like, just spin the wheels a little bit more, possibly.
To me, it was very Iron Man 2. Like, the villain even looked like Whiplash kind of at the end, like, like the suit came over him and he's got like a little red whip. I was like, okay, this is like, my wife was like, it feels like Ant-Man in there, like, like with the older person having the power and like giving it to the new Blue Beetle. Because again, Ted Kord is in here. He was an old I wouldn't say parody superhero, but a superhero who didn't take himself seriously, right? And I wish we would have seen some of that, like, rather than just like, oh, this is some chewing gum my dad was developing in case ever needed it, and then we get like the gum later. I'm like, Oh, I wanted to see like maybe old footage of this old Blue Beetle like floating around. Would be cool.
And that's a great example, I would say, of the moments that weren't effective and felt very out of place and cheesy and, cringy in a way. I totally understand that an older, kind of more vintage superhero that they claim in the movie to the audience that, didn't really take much seriously, but we never get to see it. They never show us. They only tell us.
Yeah.
So when these things start to transpire and the freaking spaceship or whatever farts and they do a bug fart, it's just like, are we watching Blue's Clues next? Like, what's happening here?
I love the bug. I thought the bug ship was very reminiscent of like something maybe out of James Gunn's Suicide Squad.
Listen, the ship itself was cool, but like it farts at the end. Like, I'm not saying that can't be effective, but like in the movie in which they had established and the father had just died like 15 minutes ago, the ship is farting and it literally says fart and it makes a fart sound effect. Like, those are the things that kind of take me out of the narrative.
I was totally fine because I think that fit the narrative. But you mentioned tonally, this movie is all over the place, right? Like, literally, the dude, Jaime, his whole thing is like, don't kill people. Like, I'm not gonna kill people, whatever. But like, his grandma takes a Gatling gun to every faceless bad guy down a hallway. Like,
the
I'm
bug
like,
ship impales one of the
I'm
bad guys.
I'm like, you should have just done the killing. Like, just don't say we're not a killer and then kill people like the faceless enemies. You're not gonna kill someone with a face, is what you're telling me.
And also, I don't know what this says about society in general, right? But I almost just feel like by default, an audience, at least here in the States, will accept a superhero that kills, but a superhero that doesn't kill, you kind of need to go out of your way and explain why they don't kill, right?
Yeah.
That, like, this was actually effectively done pretty well early on in the Arrow TV series, where he starts off as a vigilante that does kill, has a crisis of confidence, wants to like change his perspective and his path, and then he decides to stop killing, which makes things harder for him and, thus a little bit more entertaining for the audience. So like I get it, right? If you're just like a normal kid, you get powers. Like, yeah, you don't really want to become like a straight up killer, but like I almost like needed that to be explained, especially once his like dad dies and pretty much all of these bad guys are to blame. I would have expected him to like go off and just start like killing fools.
Well, they were like, yeah, kill the family. She's like, kill. I'm like, and he's just gonna like blast them away with a blast gun. Like, no, like it. The situation was there to line up, and it didn't really matter. Like, literally, these were faceless enemies, except for like Conrad Carapax. I hate this name, by the way. The red version of Blue Beetle, essentially, with his own like human suit, the OMAC suit. Literally, they could have killed anybody, and it would have been fine. They didn't really have to explain. You just like, we don't need to kill this one because he is in. Like, you both have the same story, kind of thing. Like, right, like. That is why you don't kill him at the end, and he goes and he becomes like, I guess, has a heel turn and like, kills Victoria Cord. But like, everything leading up to that made no sense, right? Like, yeah, you can kill. Everybody was killing people like in there. It's totally fine. Like, even the dude, I don't know his name. She called him Sanchez. He even got killed and his blood splattered on the glass. Right? You're like. Mm-hmm. Why is it okay for everybody else but on you? It was the tonality of this was all over the place, from like very goofy, very silly to very dramatic, like with oh, your dad had a heart attack. Chekhov's heart attack, right? Your dad had a heart attack, and while you were gone, but he's fine, and no, he's gonna die from a heart attack from this thing. So
I feel like, I mean, those were kind of like the story points just overall that I feel like worked a little bit better, in a sense of I like that we see this like kid. He's the first one to go to college. He comes back with his degree, and he's saddled with student debt. Something very relatable to audiences out there. And then, struggling to get a job, and that, is making him a little bit more desperate, to kind of throw himself into a scenario in which he could,
in that
come
culture,
across the Blue Beetle.
Hispanic, Latin culture is very much like your family lives together for generations, right? You all work together. They're losing their house. Their dad lost the mechanic, his mechanic's job. Like, they literally are scraping by, right? And they all have to come together. So it's not just his journey; it's that family journey, which I thought was done really well. Like the family coming together and being there for each other with that.
Yeah, and it felt very honest, especially when parts of the family were worried about reaching out to the cops about the stuff that Cord was doing because they have parts of the family that are undocumented. So, like, I was like, all of this feels like very authentic, and I got emotional at points, like, when the house burns down later on, when the community comes together. So that's the great thing is like I can be a little cynical about maybe some of like the kind of predictable rote like superhero plot lines, but it's those moments where the movie stands out and really gets to do something different and better, which gives me hope that there is more of a story here to play with. But there's one thing that I really wanted to talk about, and we mentioned at the top of the show, the thing that makes this movie the most unique out of any superhero movie, or maybe any movie out this year, is that originally was not supposed to be theatrical. So I primed my wife ahead of time going into the theater because she listens to me enough on a weekly basis. She does not sit down and listen to the podcast to know that this was originally slotted for HBO Max, which meant there was an interesting kind of turn in production that we might not never know all the details about. But I was definitely on the lookout for VFX because it's definitely something that would be changed, I would assume, with a bigger theatrical budget. And they are great shots, and they're also really bad shots. I think they made the smart choice to throw in almost all of the effort and manpower, if you will, into the look of Blue Beetle. And the hero, the character, looks great for the most part. Like whenever he's like standing there in a hero shot, close-ups on the mask. I like how they did this little technique where like this metal like chin strap almost kind of moves up and down to kind of mimic talking.
I didn't like the mouth thing. The mouth thing looked very just like up and down, and that part was the only part I didn't like. But I mean, that's a personal choice, not a knock against how it looked. I just didn't like how it moved. It didn't feel natural. But either way, it's fine. Like I agree, the suit looked great. The battles between him and I would even say the OMAC suit got enough credit. Like whenever they're fighting, like who's who and what's going on, and it looks cool. With those effects. The city sucks. Like the fake city, this fake, Florida Keys looking, like the buildings are just awful looking.
Yeah, and it feels a little odd in general too, because like I get they're trying to show us the juxtaposition of like the slums and the well-to-do city, so they're like, oh, let's put these very futuristic Blade Runner style, like kind of like holographic billboards out in front of it, and that didn't really work for me aesthetically, right? Like I'm not saying I can't stretch and possibly believe that technology could exist in this universe, but it just gives me the connotation of just like, is this supposed to be like 2123 or something? Are we 100 years in the future? It just felt odd and
it was
out of place.
Too far forward for everything else around it, and they could have taken it out, it probably would have felt better, but like the buildings were so rubbery looking, like so like the sheen wasn't there. It was like, this is the least amount of effort we're putting into these buildings to make them look like buildings. The single worst shot in the movie, which I get it, it's really just an establishing shot of the inside of Cord Industries. So I guess if you have to pull budget from anywhere, like who cares about the establishing shot of the inside of a building? But it's a shot that starts looking straight up as we kind of gaze up this long tower and it comes down. And it's just like, what am I looking at? Did this not get rendered all the way? And then we see a receptionist at a Cord desk, and it just looked like the actress was probably sitting in front of a folding table, not unlike the one I'm sitting at right now. And then they just put the intern on it, and they're like, you have 4 hours to put her at a shiny white desk with the Cord logo on it. Go. This movie's got to get shipped to the theater tonight. That's kind of what it felt like. So it helped knowing the context of the production of the movie. But if somebody had a little bit more of a picky eagle eye, I could see that maybe going like, what's going on here? Well, I think, thankfully that's at the beginning of the movie, and it looked better towards the end, right? The end of the movie, there was they actually did a really cool transition shot where they were doing the map of the island, that obviously this very lone island they have to go infiltrate, which is, Again, another predictable plot point, but they were showing it, and then they transitioned to like the CG like island. You know, obviously it wasn't a real island, but like the final. I'm like, oh, that looked really cool. I really enjoyed that look of it. But you know, some of the stuff was very. Yeah, I'm glad it just got better towards the end, right? Like the beginning started off pretty rough. I didn't I didn't expect George Lopez to be in there as much as he was. I thought he was going to be more of like a side character, like every once in a while, like. So I was like, do I take his like really, really bad, you know, mullet seriously? Like through this, like how, like it was hard to remove him from that role, like who he is a little bit.
He's a great personification of what I was saying about the movie, where it's great and awful at the same time, depending on what you're looking at. Whereas, like, whenever he's just, like, overreacting to everything, it's hilarious. Like, he's screaming about something that he's seeing.
The truck that got shot up, I actually laughed out loud when he was screaming about the truck getting shot up. And
the running gag, and his original truck, before they give him his new one, is, like, this kitted out monster that has, like, a freaking spoiler on the tailgate.
Toyota Tacoma. I called it the Taco.
Yeah. And like, but it's so unbelievable for me to imagine this character as the hacker genius that they kind of portray him as, right? Like, I could almost get by with the fact that he kind of made something that I thought it was going to be like an EMP blast, but it was more like a signal jammer.
Like a hijacker.
And I was like, well, they like alluded to the fact that he works in like a garage or something, like a mechanic's garage, but like, I don't think working on like cars necessarily translates 1-to-1 to like surveillance technology. But, you know, I let it slide because maybe that'll be the one time that it happens. Then all of a sudden he's like hacking into like Blue Beetle's like systems. He knows how to like fly this bug and everything.
Yeah. And all the weapons.
It's just like, it's like, I can envision George Lopez doing this if they would have put maybe a little bit of effort into explaining to us why he knows this stuff, right? You know, I didn't really like a lot of the grandma shtick at the end with the Gatling gun and the jokes about her past of, you know, guerrilla warfare or whatever they were alluding to, right? But at least they attempted to try to explain why grandma can hold a Gatling gun so well. There was zero explanation of why George Lopez is good with computers.
He was the only character in the scene that we got. Like you are now the character who knows everything that we need to move the story forward. Yeah. Sometimes, you know, like and you know, it's fine that there's a love story in here. That's great, but it was a little rushed, and he's like the person always interrupting that as well the whole time. I'm like, of course he is. So, but yeah, overall, I mean, it's the sister was fine. I enjoyed the younger sister, the sarcastic, very like, I forget, I don't know, I don't remember her name.
I can appreciate any character that has enthusiasm for going to the bathroom. Yeah, you know, I was sold when she wanted to have that high class poop inside of the house. So I did enjoy that. The kind of like the weapons in general that the family all gets at the end. You know, I was kind of
Kamala Khan.
Yeah, exactly. She had the fist and the shield. And was that explicitly supposed to be a power glove, or was it just supposed to look like a power glove?
Supposed to look like a power glove, because the Blue Beetle would have been around in the 80s, 90s-ish era when he would have been I guess in action, if you will.
Yeah, and we really never got much of an explanation of why the Beetle chose him, because the Blue Beetle seemed to be the original guy, seemed to be well revered. George Lopez, who basically hates superheroes, especially Batman, calls him a fascist, right? He liked Blue Beetle, so we kind of like get the check, the sign off that Blue Beetle was this good, solid guy, good hero. Why wasn't he chosen by the Beetle originally, right? It doesn't seem just to be like, oh, you got to be a good person. So, I mean, obviously these are all things that they could develop in a sequel, but, you know, we are just expected as an audience to just, like, sit back and just let it wash over you. We got to get to the next act. But at least, you know, we are emotionally drawn through it a little bit, which is good. We have some good effects and some action scenes.
You don't get a lot of family stuff on this level, right? Like, you know, and that was like a downer. I really, you know, back to, there's a scene where the dad is sitting outside having a drink of tequila. Like, a lot of Hispanic families use their front yards, like sit in their front yards, right? That's what they do. And I was like, I can like it wasn't like they're having a talk in his bedroom. They were literally doing like what families like that would do, like that culture would do. And I'm like, this is great. The director, I forget his name, but he obviously Hispanic Latin connections, and I'm like, they really just nailed that vibe of it. But like, you could feel he was making a movie for streaming. Like there are some things that, like budget and like pacing saved for streaming services right along the way. So I'm like,
a lot of like interior shots or kind of industrial locations, small sets. But I don't think it necessarily detracted overall from my enjoyment. It just, everything just felt small, which sometimes would make it feel intimate and good, but then also sometimes make it feel like where's the energy that sometimes you might expect going to the movie theater, right?
Yeah.
But
a very nondescript hallway sequence like that last 15 minutes in underground, right? Like you're like, yeah, we get it. You got these you're using the cheap underground hallway sets that everybody has.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I liked some of the choreography with the combat, especially in the beginning when the Blue Beetle kind of takes over. Yep. So that was fun to see the kind of the upper limits of the combat style. Mm-hmm. I like the weaponry that the Beetle creates. Like, I thought the staple gun was interesting. The even though they're not lethal, kind of like those big boom pulses, those are fun. I liked that we briefly got to see that Fifth Element gun, which was a fun little nod, and we also got basically see the Buster Sword, which was all over the trailer as well. I wish we would have gotten more of that, and maybe even we get some context of what he's making and how it relates to his life in a way, right? Because I mean, I guess I can assume him at his age would have played like video games and Final Fantasy, right? Yeah. But we don't really see any of that. We just have to assume that the kid knows it. So I almost expect like a scene, something along the lines of just like, oh, we all thought you were gonna waste your childhood playing video games, but then you went off to college, and maybe we see one of the video games, and it's like we see the Buster Sword, so just to bring it all together.
They can't afford that, Mike. That's licensing. They did not afford for this movie.
Yeah, I guess you don't have to license the vague look of a big broad sword.
Big sword, yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah, no, I think again, we've said it. It's a middling movie, not because it's average, but because there's some swings and some misses, some swings and some hits. Mm-hmm. And if it had not been swinging, it would have been again probably just boring and bland. Yeah. So I'm glad they were at least trying with what they had.
Yeah.
And I hate Susan Sarandon. Susan Sarandon was like she plays such a bad person in this, but like it's the same smarmy like I'm a Texie, don't cross me kind of thing. I'm like could have at least given a little more flavor to that.
Yeah, it's a throwaway character. It reminded me a lot of the bad guy in the Defenders as well. Because I get those two actresses mixed up a lot in my head.
Sigourney Weaver?
Sigourney Weaver and Susan Sarandon. Yeah, sometimes I just get them mixed up in my head. So I was kind of bringing in vibes from that. Yeah, it's the villain was, it could have been literally anybody.
She's like a Darren Cross from Ant-Man and Obadiah Stane from the first Iron Man. Like literally mixed. You're like, yes, you want to control the board and you want to make weapons, even though someone said you don't want to make weapons, but at the same time you want the abilities to use and control them all. It was, again, nothing new in this movie, but still some swings and attempts to make it good.
Yeah, and I think the kind of like the last gripe I have overall that maybe they could subtly change and nobody would complain or notice if this franchise moves forward. I did not like the voice of the Beetle. It had a name, but I don't remember the name. It starts like a K or something. Like that. Yeah. It basically just sounds like Siri. It sounds like the default Siri voice, and it felt like a wasted opportunity to do something else unique there, right? Because your audience, the closest comparison that everyone is going to make is going to be Jarvis. Yeah. Or even like Friday, which I would say both of those voices are unique and entertaining to listen to, even without seeing the body that's attached to it, right? But this is just, it felt like a computer, like a robot, like they were just doing text to speech. So I felt like, well, this is a missing opportunity where you could have really endeared us to was it Carapax? No, that was the villain.
Yeah.
Like you could have maybe endeared us to the Beetle in some way with a more relatable, enticing voice. And it's like, this is just ones and zeros coming at me.
Well, I wouldn't even say. I would say. I know this Beetle's been on Earth, but like, you know, he just says, "Oh, it told me its name," and like we didn't hear you tell its name. Like, it's a voice, right? Voiceover work, whether he's wearing the suit or not, which I think it does at the end scene. Finally, they could have easily done this, right? Like, used more voiceover, built it up as like, I don't understand your culture as like, this Hispanic Latin culture. And it could have had some very interesting interactions just by having dialogue rather than having to, film someone, right? Like, it's just voice.
Yeah.
It's just voice. Like, literally have someone record it in a booth. You could have had a lot more.
Yeah. Like, I'm not expecting, like, the sass that comes between, like, Venom and Eddie Brock in those movies, right? But at least also that voice as well, very memorable, right? Just even with the tenor of the way it sounds. I thought it would have been kind of interesting if, like, the whole shtick here is that the Blue Beetle can create whatever, weapon they imagine, right? I almost thought the voice could have been whatever he imagined. Like, maybe there could have been, like, a funny joke where
it could have been
had, like,
the main girl's voice, Jimmy Cord.
Yeah, exactly. Or it could have been like maybe he had a crush on a specific well-known like actress or something that we all know of, and then that was the voice, like I don't know, like Selma Hayek or something like that, and it's just like, and then maybe like later at the end of the movie, like the family like hears the voice somehow, and they're like, wait a minute, why does that sound like the girl on the poster in your room? There could have just been a little bit more there where it just seemed like they went with default robot voice, 001.wave file,
Yeah, exactly. And it was just, they told us about the voice more than showed us about the voice, or at least used the voice to tell us things. I'm like, that would have been way more interesting just to hear it from them rather than telling us that the robot told you its name.
Yeah.
So.
And I feel like I'm just like griping so much now, even though I said, I enjoyed the movie, overall, and it's a soft recommend, but like, I think there's a lot of potential here. I think the cast is very infectious. Yep. I think we would like to see them again. There's so much more you could do with the Blue Beetle. If he can imagine any power weapon he wants, there's so much to do you could do there with, like, you could really pump up the stunt choreography. Like, in that last hallway fight, he makes almost kind of like a sledgehammer thing that like slaps down the missile. Like, that was really cool. So there's a lot to do here, but the last thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap it up, I wanted to hear, what's your strategy, Chris? If you're involved, okay, you're in charge of the sequel to Blue Beetle. It's been greenlit, right? Mm-hmm. And they want to fold it into the DCU at large, right? What's the strategy there, right? We have mentioned that Batman exists, Superman exists. There is a legacy, at least, of older superheroes being out there in the world. So being a hero is not a new concept in Blue Beetle's universe. Could this even telegraph onto James Gunn's Superman at all? I guess we do have the advantage of they don't explicitly say how long Superman has been active for in the Blue Beetle universe, but I don't even know if technically they could weave this into the bigger universe.
I think they absolutely could. It's such a weird. The only reference to another city was his Gotham University shirt, right? His sweatshirt he had. They could easily pull this there. I think, again, you mentioned, we talked earlier at the beginning of the show, the space aspect, right? This beetle came from space. There's obviously other colored beetles out there. The Green Lanterns exist. You can tie to them. Blue Beetle has always been tied to Booster Gold in the comics as well, like Time Traveler, right? Like, there's a lot of opportunity to bring him in here and put him in something, but he doesn't need to be serious. He can be your Ant-Man, like in Civil War, right? Like, hey, we're going to go get Ant-Man, and he's going to have a couple cool things, but that's really about it. I think you could do a sequel, and I think you time jump a couple years, he's adjusted to it, he's just... I don't know who I don't know who his villains are, right? Like, who is he actively working against? Maybe, Jenny Cord is a philanthropist kind of person. Maybe like they're doing some small, humanitarian missions with the suit rather than actual, fighting, big world-ending events, because this was kind of small. It wasn't world-ending. It was on like a little island. So I think there's plenty of opportunities to do that, and then you tie in where is Ted Cord, and the end credit scene, like where's he been for all these years, Mike? Like the past 20 years, right? 10, 20 years, because he disappeared. He's somewhere. His computer's talking to him. Where did he go, and what does that mean for everything? And learn more about the space, like you mentioned, the space thing. Is there an outer space version? Is there someone who's going around trying to collect the Beetles, all the different colors, capture them? Maybe they come to Earth, and that's where you tie in the Authority and Superman and maybe some other people. I don't know, but I see some easy ways to do it. That can be like, we already got the origin out of the way. We don't have to reference anything else. We know he got his Beetle from space, and he's got a suit that does whatever he needs to do in the moment. Let's just pull that forward and run with it. I don't think if they overthink it, it'll make it better. But at the same time, they can just be like, well, we don't want it, and it's fine too, right? Yeah. Like either way, nobody's at a loss.
And I suppose the moment where they do drop other superhero names, it's like so short, it's so quick that maybe they even just hand wave it away, right? Yeah. Like maybe, since this is the younger Superman that Gunn is setting up is supposed to be relatively new to the scene, right? Maybe he doesn't show up until post Blue Beetle movie, and they just hand wave it away. Marvel's done it before.
They mentioned Superman and Marvel stuff. Like it's a generic enough phrase, if you will.
Yeah. Possibly, but I would like to see the character move on.
Yeah,
I like his plucky vibes. I think the power sets are cool. The family dynamics great, but I don't have high expectations.
Yeah.
For the franchise moving forward, just at the current state of just Hollywood in general, which is a bit unfortunate. But suppose one way you could vote is with your wallet. You can head out to the theater, give this one a watch, maybe stream it a bunch once it's on Max, since it's all vertically integrated and they'll see that data.
Yeah.
Maybe we won't get a movie sequel. Maybe we'll get a sequel series or something like that.
Yeah,
but
I can see it. Like I said, I think offhand references. I don't want them to waste something like this, because this is a great opportunity for a lesser known DC character to kind of come to the forefront, right? Because if anything, the DCU has been chock full with really is their A-list characters the past 20 years, 30 years, right? So, the fact Batgirl got scrapped, awful. Blue Beetle actually getting a theatrical release, I think is great for it. And hopefully that they do see some value in this character. And at least, I don't need, I don't think this movie caters to quote unquote representation too much. I think it tells a good story about someone in a different culture, but I didn't feel like the representation portion was like shoved down our throats, and that was good. Like everybody can have a super. So hopefully it works.
It never feels forceful if it's authentic and from like a true source, which I really appreciated in the film. But I mean, I'm a little surprised, Chris, that we ended up being just so positive about the movie overall. Both of us, if you listen to our weekly news episodes, I wouldn't say we were actually excited for this movie. Privately, we were texting each other going like, oh wait, the movie's out this weekend. Oh, I got to go grab my ticket. I totally forgot about it, but we should definitely go watch it.
Yeah. Not top of mind for a movie right now. And honestly, this movie, not its fault, it's coming out at a really weird time for DC, right? Like literally, if you waited 1 year, this movie probably would have done, I would say, better, right? Like maybe better than it is, because we've gotten the Flash we get the Flash and Shazam 2 out of our mouths. Aquaman 2 would have been done. This would have felt fresher than anything else. Like we're in the middle of something still, and that doesn't feel fresh. It doesn't feel authentic to starting something new. After Aquaman, probably be like, it could be either way. So let's watch it and get hyped for it. So
I mean, we have a very useful upcoming release calendar on our website where you can see all of the movies that we cover when they're coming out in a nice text-based list. Aquaman: The Lost Kingdom is hitting supposedly December 25th. I think legally it has to. So we don't expect that to be shifting and moving. And then after that, I think DC-wise, it probably just going to be Joker 2.
Yep.
Possibly another Matt Reeves Batman movie.
That's after Superman. That's 2025.
All right, so we'll see how that all shakes out. But yeah, so basically, are we going to get any sort of telling signs? Like, I am so curious what happens in this Aquaman movie now. Like, do you think they just rip the after credit scenes out of it? Like, no, we don't. We're done with this. We don't want to allude to anything else anymore. Or maybe they add a new post-credit scene in where there's just like the multiverse is crumbling and you're probably not going to survive.
Jason Momoa as Lobo shows up and kills Jason Momoa's Aquaman.
Whoa, that would be wild. I mean, talk about an opportunity to like. Usually, you have to like we saw at Marvel. These characters have to exist for at least a decade before you kill them off on screen, right? I mean, come on, how often do you get a chance to kill
yourself?
Aquaman?
You kill yourself, really. You know, Jason Momoa's taking over as the other one. It'd be interesting. They'll never do it, but it's there. But yeah, overall, like I said, I agree. I'm not naive. It's easier for us whenever we review things to always harp on the things you don't like the most, right? But like overall, I think we can sit here and say it's great to see the characters, the actors, but like you need to experience it for yourself to really get that real. I mean, like I said, authentic character kind of stuff. So, yeah. But anyway, Mike, let's jump over. We got to record our news episode before you get blown away in those hurricane gale force winds. Where can they find you at in the meantime?
Well, you can find me at Mike Royer Design on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, any other social media that handle might exist. But you can also go read my webcomics at liferewardsrisk.com. I would very much appreciate that. Chris, if people want to find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Valdan87, or video game servers at the same name, VALDAN. If people want to know more about the show, where they can catch our weekly news episodes, where can they get all that good information at?
Oh, just head on over to superheroslate.com to find our poorly rendered headquarters. Where we have almost all of the polygons that you could have seen on your PlayStation 2.
There's at least one folding desk between the both of us that we record on. So, yeah, it's fairly good.
Yeah, but you can find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever else you'd love to listen to find podcasts like ourselves here. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and you can get merch at superheroslate.com/store. We love hearing from you. Reach out, let us know what you thought about Blue Beetle. If you think it can neatly fold into the next version of the DC universe, we'd love to hear from you. And we also love our super fans. So if you want to be a super fan of this show, all you got to do is share the show with a friend, share the show with a buddy, and we'll be here every week, folks. Except for next week, actually.
Yeah,
we're gonna be taking a week off next week.
Yeah, we just took it right out of us. We gotta reset, come back after. But we will see you guys then.
All right, bye.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe.